and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 491, and today's date is October 13th, 2014, and the title of this episode is De-Dollarization Continues with Iran and Russia Creating a Joint Bank System. And we can see this has been the continuing theme and has not stopped, where Russia and China have been de-dollarizing, separating themselves from the West. We see now that Russia and Iran are deciding to do the same exact thing, and all of this is because of what has been happening around the world. They see the dollar is dying, the dollar is in trouble, and the central bankers are printing their way out of the entire thing. But eventually what's going to happen, that this will eventually all come to a screeching halt. What we're seeing in the Middle East right now, we're seeing Yemen, Libya, Iraq, all fighting against the puppet regime, the United States central bankers, and they want their countries back. They want the central bank completely out of their country. They do not want the United States in there. And when these countries remove the puppet regime and they sell the oil not using the U.S. dollar, this is when the U.S. dollar has a major, major problem. This is when we see the dollar fly back to the United States. We see the devaluation of the dollar, we see prices go up, and of course the central bankers will not let it go very far because they will want to start some type of an event to cover this entire thing up and then eventually lead into World War III. And we can see how this is all being prepared, and we see the United States central bankers pretty much provoking and creating these instances all around the world at this time. We see in the Pacific they are continually provoking China, moving all military assets into this region to encircle China. We see it in Eastern Europe. We see it with NATO and the United States flying in military assets. We see there's always more and more sanctions placed on Russia, even though there's a ceasefire agreement in Ukraine at this time. Again, the central bankers did not get what they paid for. They wanted the entire country of Ukraine, and now it's broken into many different pieces. The economy is failing, and everything does not look good there, but it really doesn't matter to them. They're going to continually push on with war, continually provoke Russia into starting something, and they will not give up. They'll continually do this. And we see in the Middle East, the United States central bankers now are in Iraq and in Syria, and very soon we will see troops come into this area. Of course, they're in Syria right now, illegally, kind of, because that is a sovereign nation, and Syria has never given permission for the United States central bankers to come into the country and bomb their country. And when we look at what they're really bombing, it is not really the Islamic State. It is the infrastructure of Syria. They are pretty much decimating the economy there, setting up the whole entire thing so they can put in a buffer zone, a no-fly zone, and then eventually go after Assad. Now, of course, they have to do this under the cover so no one realizes that this is going on, but this is exactly what's going on. They've tried this a year ago in August of 2013 with that false flag event of a chemical weapon attack inside Syria. They blamed it on Assad, and then we come to find out, oh, it was the rebels. You know, the paid mercenaries that the United States government central bankers have been supporting and paying and supplying military weapons. They're the ones who used chemical weapons on the people of Syria. But nobody has a problem with this. And of course, Putin stepped in at that time to said, you know, listen, all you want is chemical weapons removed. That's great. That's what we're going to do. And they forged a peace agreement with this, and they removed all the chemical weapons inside of Syria. But of course, we always knew that this is not what the United States central bankers wanted. Their real agenda was to get rid of Assad. That's basically what they were trying to do. We saw it in Geneva too, the talks they were having, and the only thing that was on the agenda was for Assad to step down. They removed all the Syrian government officials from the United States, replaced them with the Syrian opposition. They're all getting prepared for this. They know exactly what they're doing. They take it a step at a time. 1 year goes by, and here we are once again in the same exact position, but this time the United States central bankers are inside Syria, completely bombing Syria, and we can see they're getting ramped up, ready to bring troops into this area. Now, in the overall economic grand scheme of what has been going on here, we see Europe is pretty much falling apart. They are in a depression. Greece right now is saying, listen, we're done with the IMF. Athens has informed the International Monetary Fund that it will end its obligations to the unpopular rescue program, which placed crippling austerity measures on the country for more than a year earlier. And we can see right now they are done with this. They're continually being put into more and more debt, more and more austerity. Unemployment's going up, youth unemployment is skyrocketing, and the country is going nowhere. Recently, the Greece government has made many deals with China, trying to revitalize their business, bring in more work, bring in more jobs, and trying to get out of this debt spiraling scenario here. And we can see the IMF, they don't want them to leave this because they want to give them more and more debt, because this is how their business runs. More and more debt, spread it around the world, and this is exactly what they're trying to do. And we can see right now the bailout to Greece was the largest rescue effort in financial history. Not only do we not need a new memorandum rescue loan agreement, this is coming from Greece, we don't need the rest of the money that from the start of next year we were on course to get from the current memorandum. We can leave it 1.5 years earlier. That is our goal. We want to try it without it to see if we can make it. Last week, Lagarde advised Athens to continue with the program, saying that Greece is still confronted by a budgetary shortfall of about 15 billion euros for 2015. But let's see which agreements and which direction Greece goes in. Who knows? Maybe they're siding up with China right now to help them out of this entire scenario, just like Argentina. Now, we understand that Russia is trying to create their own SWIFT alternative. We know that SWIFT came out and said, listen, we cannot place sanctions on Russia. But I don't think Russia's taking their word for it. And, of course, they want to be completely separate and apart from the Western central banking system. The two biggest banks in Russia, Sberbank and VTB, are in talks to create an alternative to the SWIFT global system for interbank financial communications. There is an alternative. We can use the central bank system that is already in operation, and we may make our own. We are already in discussions with Sberbank. Switching Russia off SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications, would instantly isolate it from the global finance, as happened with Iran in 2012. And this is exactly what they want to do. They want to isolate themselves. They want to be separate and apart. And we can see that China, Russia, Iran, they're all heading in that direction. Now, the central banks of China and Russia have signed a 3-year ruble-yuan currency swap deal up to $25 billion in order to boost trade using national currencies and lessen dependence on the dollar and euro. We need to expand the practice of using national currencies in trade. The deal is valid for 3 years and can be extended if both Russia and China agree. Using more local currencies will speed up trade between the two countries, who are aiming to reach about $100 billion by 2015. Trade between Russia and China is already nearly $90 billion and is scheduled to hit about $200 billion in the next 6 years. So they're really pushing this hard. Now, we understand that Iran has been bypassing the sanctions that the United States central bankers has placed on Iran. And of course, they're trying to work out this P5+1 deal where they're going and looking at their nuclear program. And this is completely what it's not about. What it's about is they're trying to access their banking system, put all their resources on the dollar, but we see that this is really not working out at this time, and this whole nuclear talks is a complete illusion. Now, Iran and Russia plan to establish a joint bank as an effort to multiply bilateral trade and bypass sanctions on the Islamic Republic's banking sector. Tehran and Moscow are studying the possibilities of opening up a new chapter in trade relations that could break the domination of Western currencies over bilateral exchanges. Such a bank would be able to exchange money between the two sides using reals and rubles and put aside dollars, euros, and pounds. So we can see right now they are really pushing this hard. They are taking all the countries now and pretty much bypassing the dollar. They don't want to have anything to do with it at this time. And of course, as we know, Syria, Iran, they're all under sanctions, and we can see this why this would benefit them. And the United States central bankers would lose a foothold on sanctioning these countries if they completely do without the dollar. And we can see they're heading in this direction. And we can see why everything is starting to get ramped up right now, where they're trying to get into Syria. And you know that eventually they're going to be moving into Iran, because their main goal, and it had always been, and if we go all the way back to when General Wesley Clark put out that list of all those countries, Syria and Iran are basically the last countries, and here we are moving into Syria, and then eventually we'll move into Iran, but I don't think it's going to get that far. I think China and Russia will step in eventually and say, whoa, enough's enough, and this is where the big problems start to unfold. Now, we all know the government has the secret no-fly list. You don't know how you get on there. You don't know how to get off. And we see right now that this no-fly list is kind of crumbling apart right now. The U.S. government's secretive no-fly list on Friday, 7 people who challenged their inclusion on the list were finally cleared and told they can once again enjoy the right to board an aircraft and fly commercially over domestic airspace. Friday's announcement by the Department of Homeland Security was described by one attorney involved with the case as the first ever significant blow to the unfair and unnecessary secrecy regime that surrounds the government list that now contains thousands upon thousands of names. And of course, this is completely unconstitutional. You don't know how to get off of it. You don't know how you were put on it. And believe me, this is not the only list the government has. The government has many, many lists, because what they've been doing using FBI, NSA, and DHS, they've been creating these social profiles of every single person using facial recognition, other information like email, and other types of data that they've been using to create a profile of you, correlate all the data so they can understand who you are in contact with, what your purchasing is like, who you've been working with, because they're trying to create a list of those people who are a threat to their authority, because eventually when this entire system comes down, they're going to go after those people who they do believe are a threat. Now, they're stepping this up with one other thing. They're going to be using voice print harvesting. Corporate and government databases in the U.S., Europe, and elsewhere contain more than 65 million samples of people's voices. Now, sometimes bank clients may not even suspect that their voice print recognition is in effect. For example, 2 major U.S. banks, J.P. Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo, use a voice screening system provided by pretty much match the voice print of people calling them against a database of suspected identity thieves. Now, you know what they're doing. They're matching it up, building up their database. The U.S. government is eventually going to use this, and they really don't give you that much of a warning or any type of sign that they've been using this, and they do it in the background. But what they're trying to do is pretty much build this together. If they can put this with facial recognition, with your fingerprints, with your iris scan, with your DNA, they have a complete picture of every single person. Now, as we know, Ebola right now, there's really 2 confirmed cases inside the United States, and one of them has died. But what's very interesting, that person died after they got the vaccine, and he was not doing well. They gave him the vaccine, and then everything started to really fall apart after that. So I'm curious if the vaccine actually killed him, or did Ebola kill him. But what we're seeing right now is there's 2 confirmed, and we see a lot of suspected cases out there where people saying, oh, I have a headache, I have a temperature, but nothing's really panning out that Ebola is really spreading across the country at this time. We also understand in West Africa, they're continuing with the notion that Ebola is everywhere, everything's getting worse, please believe us, Ebola is real, and they're continually doing this. And I don't know why you have to tell people Ebola is real, because if you have Ebola, you pretty much know it and you see it around you. And it feels like it's the same thing the president's doing with the economy, saying, listen, the economy's getting better, it's recovering, you just don't feel it. And they're doing the same thing in the West African countries. Yes, Ebolas are real. You have to believe us. It's out there. People are getting it. And I'm not really sure it's as widespread as they're saying at this point in time, but we'll have to see. But what's very interesting is these West African countries, they were on a verge of recovering. Their economies were starting to do very, very well, and then all of a sudden they were hit with this Ebola outbreak down in West Africa. And like I said, we understand that each one of these countries had a huge amount of oil and natural gas discovered in these countries, and their economies now are completely falling apart, I should say, in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. And again, Sierra Leone is having Russia come down and help them out. But what's very interesting is that Senegal and Nigeria pretty much have their outbreaks contained at this time. And as we know, the United States would love to get into Nigeria. They've been trying very, very hard to get into Nigeria, but they have their case pretty much contained. And again, in Uganda, we understand China is spending a lot of money in the economic zone in Uganda. We understand there's a huge amount of oil inside Uganda, and all of a sudden we had an Ebola-like breakout there. So this is very interesting how it's happening in these countries. Their economies were on the verge of recovery, and now they're pretty much decimated at this time. And Russia is creating their own Ebola vaccine. Now, Russia will send the new antiviral drug to West Africa to help in the struggle against the spread of the deadly Ebola virus. In the next 2 months, we will produce enough of the drug to send to our team in Guinea and to see its efficiency in clinical use. According to the minister, the efficiency of the new drug varies from 70 to 90%. So it's giving the United States government drug companies a run for their money. They're bringing it down there already, doing testing. We see the United States central bankers trying to do the same exact thing, and we'll have to see how this goes and if this drug pans out. I'd still be leery in taking any type of vaccine at this time. Don't really know what's in it, and as of right now, there's only 2 cases in the United States. We know we've heard this before. I discussed it before about mandatory vaccinations. Again, like I said, they don't need it to completely go widespread. It just has to be the fear that convinces people they want the vaccine. And we can see we are definitely headed in that direction. Now, Obama is asking federal authorities to take measures to make sure hospitals and healthcare providers across the United States are prepared to deal with the Ebola patients. And again, most of these hospitals are not prepared for Ebola. I think there's like maybe 4 or 5 hospitals that really have the science and the facilities to handle an Ebola type of breakout. And we also understand that a nurse in Dallas contracted Ebola, and of course CDC is saying there's a breach in protocol. Maybe their protocol is not good enough to deal with Ebola because it really makes no sense in what they're talking about. Of course, they're saying as this nurse was removing her uniform, taking off everything, she might have touched her face or something like that with her gloves or hands. But there's an easy way to get rid of this. I mean, bleach kills Ebola. Why don't they just completely take the hands, dump it in bleach, douse the person with bleach to kill everything, and they wouldn't have a problem? So we're not really sure what the breach was, and it seems like here in the United States, they're very lax in protecting the people. Like, I saw a video where the Philadelphia man, was up there saying that he has Ebola, and the people in the hazmat suits came in, took him off the plane. But what about the rest of the people who were in contact with this person? It seems a little ridiculous that all the hazmat people came in and were taking precautions, but there were no precautions with all the other people on the plane. Very interesting. Now, we understand the North Korean president, he's still missing in action, and the United States is taking this very, very seriously. They are monitoring what is going on in North Korea, and they are watching it very carefully. They want to know what's happened. He's been missing for a month. And of course, there's rumors out there that there's a coup going on, that everything is on lockdown. And we have to remember, China and Russia have been making deals with North Korea for railway connections, with financial connections. And the United States basically has been demonizing North Korea. They would love to have a regime change in North Korea. If they could, that's what they would push for. And we can see that maybe there was some type of team or something in there to remove him, but there is no reports of this as of yet. But we're going to have to watch this very, very carefully. Now, South Korea right now is building up their military, and it has deployed additional weapons to islands near the tense western maritime border to better deal with North Korea's growing threats. And they're continually adding more armored vehicles, more missiles, because they're protecting themselves from North Korea. And of course, this again is provoking. We understand that they're firing back and forth. And again, wherever the war can be started, this is what the United States central bankers will do. And you can see it's continually provoking, provoking, provoking. Now, it looks like there are more vessels heading into the Black Sea. NATO is strengthening its presence in the Black Sea. By the end of the week, a French warship will join 2 American vessels already stationed in the Black Sea. On October 3rd, the command ship, the USS Mount Whitney, entered the Black Sea, joining the USS Cole Destroyer, and it looks like a French ship will be entering. Now, as we know, Ukraine is not doing well at all. It looks like a new projection of what their GDP is going to be like this year. It's going to be down by -9%. So it is not doing well. And again, Ukraine, their economy is falling apart. They have a massive amount of debt, and they have no gas being pumped into Ukraine from Russia. And Russia says all you have to do is pay the small portion and you will receive gas. Now, Ukraine has come back and said, listen, we disagreed to pay part of the outstanding debt from Russia before you supply us with more gas. So they want more gas, and then they'll pay. Well, I think Russia did this before, right? They kept the gas going, and Ukraine never paid. So what happens is they cut them off, and now they need to show good faith and give money to get gas flowing again. Just like if you're in your home and you haven't paid your electric bill or your gas bill for a couple of months, they call you up and say, listen, if you don't pay within this period of time, we shut it off. And as that date passes, the electric or gas is shut down. To get it back up, guess what you got to do? You got to pay them a little bit or pay them the whole amount that you owe before with a little bit of a surcharge to turn everything back on. And Ukraine does not want to do this. They rather have the gas flowing first, and then we will pay. So it seems a little ridiculous on their part right now, and it seems like eventually they're going to have to pay because they're moving into the winter months, and it is going to be very, very cold for the people, and they don't want these people rising up pushing the government out once again, because this would really drive the people to do this. Now, it looks like Russia is getting closer to Bahrain. Putin confirms the positive development of relations between Russia and Bahrain, and he says that I am pleased over these years relations between Russia and Bahrain have been developing and contacts continue, and it seems like they have a lot of cooperation in many different sectors like culture, economy, and they're getting closer and closer together. And of course, the United States central bankers are not going to like this, so who knows what will happen in this area. Now, it looks like in Lebanon they're going to be putting off their elections until 2017. Of course, they're blaming this on the instability linked to the Syrian crisis, and this is why they can't have elections in Libya. The civil war in neighboring Syria has stoked sectarian tensions and aggravated long-standing rivalries in Lebanon. There is no longer a possibility of holding the elections because of the deteriorating security situation in the country. Lebanon right now has been without a president since May. So basically what they're saying, and this is coming out of the corporate media, Lebanon is in a battle. The puppet regime is fighting against the tribes. The tribes want their country back. They want the puppet regime out of there, and they've been fighting right now. Of course, they've been using the Islamic State, saying, oh, look, the Islamic State is setting up a recruitment center. They're riding around on motorcycles holding their flags, and they're using this because wherever the Islamic State is, that's where the United States will be going eventually. And we know in Yemen, the same thing is happening. The people there, the tribes, are rising up and they're saying, listen, we want our country back. And what they're doing, and this is coming from the southern tribes in Yemen. They have called for a huge demonstration Tuesday to demand secession. The aim is to send one last message to the northerners that we are more determined than ever to build an independent state. The people of the south are marching on Aden from all provinces. And again, this is where the United States have been using a lot of drones because they're trying to keep the people pushed back. Of course, they call them Al-Qaeda because this is the only way they can use drones on those people, because they have to link them to terrorists or otherwise they can't use the drones. So this is exactly what they've been doing. And we can see right now that people are definitely rising up. They're taking back the country. The same thing's happening in Libya, Lebanon, and Iraq. It's happening in all of these countries, and this is why the United States central bankers are so desperate to take control of this whole region, and they're using the Islamic State as a proxy army to cause chaos in the region. And of course, as we know, there's a bill in Congress where it lists the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, or any other terrorist groups, which allows the United States to go after those terrorist groups no matter what country they're in. And we can see they're trying to push this through at this time. Now it looks like, and we know, President Obama said there's going to be no boots on the ground in Iraq or Syria or anywhere in the Middle East. No boots on the ground. We're going to do everything by air. But it seems like the Iraqi officials have issued a desperate plea for the American to bring in U.S. ground troops. And they want them because the Islamic State's militants are now within striking distance of Baghdad. Now you have to remember, there's two things going on in Iraq at this time. There's the Islamic State, which is created by the U.S., Israel, UK. They're being used as a proxy army, and they're being used so the United States can bring in military assets into the region and eventually go into Syria. We also have at the same time tribes rising up in Iraq trying to take back their country. They saw an opportunity, they took it, and this is exactly what they're doing. The Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Martin Dempsey today said his instinct at this point is that the war will eventually require the advisors, those Marines who are sent in as advisors who are combat ready. Well, they may no longer be advisors. Those U.S. ground troops sent to Iraq will have to engage in ground combat, particularly in the push to retake the major city of Mosul. General Dempsey went on to say that the Islamic State is successfully blending into the Sunni population, which he's saying is that the tribes that are rising up inside of Iraq right now, they are losing the battle. They are approaching Baghdad. And of course, they're saying the Islamic State is blending into them. And it's very hard to pick out who the Islamic State is and who the Sunni tribes are. But what they're really doing is they're bombing the tribes at this time. They really don't even go after the Islamic State because they're controlled and maneuvered by the United States government, Israel, and the UK. Now, Iceland is out there, and they're saying they're going to be closing down all websites created by the Islamic State. And it's amazing how many websites the Islamic State has the ability to create in the middle of a battle in Iraq and Syria, where there's bombings going on everywhere and everyone's going after them. So you could tell this is complete propaganda, and most of their sites are in English. Most of their propaganda is in English, and you can see they need this to convince the American people, and they have to put it in English, and this is why it's all propaganda. Now, Kuwait has agreed to host Canada's military in the war against the Islamic State. Canada marked the second NATO ally reported to have expanded deployment in Kuwait. Earlier, the United States said they were sending about 2,000 soldiers as part of a rapid deployment force in the Middle East. So again, we have troops in Kuwait standing by, getting ready. We have the advisors now who are going to be turning into a combat mode. We also know we have a division headquarters being set up in Spiker Base in Iraq, where they'll be bringing in anywhere between 10 and 30 soldiers. We already have word from Iraq that 13,000 soldiers will be heading there, and we can see they are definitely getting prepared to put boots on the ground. Now, Turkey is out there, and they are denying that the U.S. officials, they gave them permission to use their air base in Incirlik. They're saying there's absolutely no agreement at this time, and of course the United States is saying, yes, we're working with them, and you're going to see eventually that they will be using the base. And again, this is all to confuse everyone of what's really going on. and they're definitely going to be using the base. They'll be training the Syrian opposition inside Turkey. Saudi Arabia is saying to Iran, you must withdraw your forces from Syria. Now, we know that the Revolutionary Guard has forces in Syria. Iran and Syria have an agreement with each other. They work very closely together. And again, I said this in the past, what the United States central bankers are bombing inside Syria right now are the infrastructure targets like oil refineries, which had nothing to do with the Islamic State, which were civilian-run, grain silos and other areas. And I believe from everything that I've been seeing, they have been targeting the other forces inside Syria to clear out this area, and a lot of it is made up of the Revolutionary Guard. And Saudi Arabia went on to say, in many conflicts, Iran is part of the problem, not the solution. In this case, we can say that the Iranian forces in Syria are occupying forces aiding President Assad. Well, of course they are. They have an agreement. They work closely together. And again, they want those forces out there because it's making it difficult for them. Now, the Supreme Military Advisor to the Supreme Leader's representative in the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard renewed Iran's full support to the Syrian people and government in confronting the conspiracy hatched against it and combating the terrorist organizations. Turkish government's involvement in supporting the Islamic State helped the terrorist organizations expand in some areas in Syria and Iraq, clarifying that Turkey's priority is not battling the Islamic State, but funding it and helping it and creating it. And we absolutely see this because Turkey is allowing the Islamic State to move back and forth across their border. They're living there. They set up a consulate in Turkey. They're funding them. They're allowing the oil to go through Turkey. So there's a lot of evidence that supports this right now. Now, we also have German deputy speaker out there saying NATO must force Turkey to stop its undeclared support for the Islamic State and shift its policy toward the Kurdistan Worker Party, the deputy speaker of the German parliament said. Erdogan's dealing with ISIS are unacceptable. I could not believe that Turkey harbors an Islamic militant camp in Istanbul, Roth said. Turkey has also allowed weapons to be transported into Syria through its borders. Also, the Islamic State has been able to sell its oil via Turkey. And we can see that Germany is even out there saying this has to stop. We see that Turkey is completely supporting all of this. And of course, behind that is the United States, is Israel, is UK, plus the other Arab nations who want Assad out of power. Now, it seems like Syria's UN envoy now is accusing Turkey and Saudi Arabia for giving weapons of mass destruction to the Islamic State, and basically they've been using chemical weapons inside the Kurdish area of Kobani. And of course, where did they get these chemical weapons? Of course, from Saudi Arabia, from the U.S., from all these different nations, and they're using it on the people inside of Syria because they really don't care about that. Again, the president was out there saying, listen, our policies do not reflect killing Syrian people, so if we kill some of them, that's just part of the whole thing. So we can see they don't really care at this point. They're going into Syria. They're making their move. They're giving chemical weapons and other military assets to the Islamic State, and they're trying to do everything they possibly can to clear out this entire area because, as we know, they want to make a buffer zone in this area. Now, there's a lot of analysts out there, and they're looking at the situation, and we've reviewed this before, but they're saying that the U.S. led airstrikes against the Islamic State near the Syrian border city of Kobani are deliberately ineffective. And this is coming from an analyst, Rickards. The airstrikes by the U.S.-led coalition against the Islamic State have not been effective as the bombing campaign does not target the militants' positions. Of course it doesn't. They're bombing the infrastructure of Syria. Now, the Syrian government is out there, and they're saying, how is it possible to fight against terrorism in a country when the leadership of that country wishes to fight but the U.S. and its allies do not recognize its sovereignty. There is a need for clear understanding of what a sovereign state is and cooperation with this country's government like this is done in Iraq. And this is coming from Syria saying this is double standards. Iraq asked the United States to come in and help out. Syria has not, and the United States central bankers decided on their own to go into Syria and into a sovereign nation. And again, this broke all laws whatsoever. Russia keeps reminding the United States of this, but again, the United States is just doing whatever they want. Now, we understand there's a lot of corporate media out there telling us that, no, the U.S. is not looking for a no-fly zone, but they really are. They're looking for the buffer zone. This is why they've been going up the East Coast across to the north, because they're trying to create this, and they definitely want a no-fly zone because they want to pretty much down the Syrian Air Force. Of course, the Islamic State does not have an Air Force, and right now, U.S. top military commander says establishing a no-fly zone may be part of the campaign. Such a move is what U.S. allies, including Turkey, have been pressing for. The possible establishment of a no-fly zone over northern Syria was hinted at by the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey. Do I anticipate there could be circumstances in the future where there would be part of a no-fly zone? Absolutely. So we can see they are building up for this, and they're definitely going to do this. Now, Syria has created guerrilla groups right now, and they are called White Shroud. These are groups that they put together, and their aim is to infiltrate and destroy the Islamic State. So they're going in very, very small tactical groups. They're moving in, and they're killing about 100 Islamic fighters at a time. They show no mercy whatsoever. They go in, they remove them, then they're out. And of course, in Deir al-Zor, Syria still has control of a portion of Deir al-Zor, and they're sending in the fighters into this region to pretty much get rid of the Islamic State, and they're moving from area to area. Now, we're going to have to watch what the United States does at this point in time, because if they start removing a lot of the proxy army, this is going to be a huge problem, because you have to remember, Syria and Iran wanted to join in on this fight to get rid of the Islamic State. The United States said, absolutely not, you're not part of the coalition, and we can see right now why? Because they wanted their proxy army to maneuver around Syria, have the United States central bankers bomb in each one of these areas, and they didn't want Syria or Iran getting involved and removing the Islamic State because they need them to do this. Now, in the Islamic State magazine, it seems that they've pretty much created this for propaganda purposes, and especially to be used in the United States, because pretty much everything is in English. And we can see they photoshopped a picture of the Islamic State flag on top of St. Peter's Square on the cover of the group's magazine, Dabiq, which called in its latest issue for the war against the Catholic Church, with the headline, "The Failed Crusade." The Photoshop cover of the Dabiq caps new threats against Rome and the Vatican, as well as forces led by the United States. And of course, they're just continually building this up, using the propaganda that the Islamic State is everywhere, and they're going to be attacking everyone, and they're trying to keep this up. And the reason why they're doing this is because they're going to need it for the main event. They want everyone to understand the Islamic State is this scary terrorist organization, because eventually when they give the green light for the main event to go, you realize where this is coming from. You also have to realize when this does happen, and it probably most likely will be a physical attack from the Islamic State. They will then use Russia and China and say, look, they just hit our financial institutions. As we know, they're doing a test today on the banking system to see if they can handle a collapse. And of course, after the test, they're going to say these banks are strong, they're ready to go, they have a couple of tweaking, but they're really good to go here, and they can withstand a collapse. And of course, they're doing this to make it seem like they rebuilt the entire system, to make it look like it's in recovery mode. And what we're really seeing is a complete setup, because when the cyber attack happens, which is not going to be from Russia or China, it's going to be from the inside, they need a way to explain how this collapse is occurring. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.